But all of this trivia is from the TARDIS Wiki article on this episode, specifically from the story notes section. So if any of this is inaccurate, it's not my fault. So the working titles for this episode included Crusader 5 and Crusader 50, with Crusader 50 being a reference to this originally being the 50th episode of the revival, as it was originally intended to be the 8th episode of this series before Silence in the Library. However, that was of course changed because I believe this is episode 10. As mentioned earlier, with Catherine Tate filming Turn Left concurrently with this episode, this is the first companion-like episode of Doctor Who. This is also the first televised story since Genesis of the Daleks to not feature the TARDIS, as this episode opens with them already on the planet Midnight and ends with them still having that conversation on the planet Midnight. David Troughton, who played Professor Hobbs in this episode, is the son of Patrick Troughton, who of course played the second Doctor, and although this episode is directed by Alice Troughton, she isn't related to Patrick Troughton that we know of, at least not immediately related to him, but for all we know, there's obviously going to be some distant relation there. David Troughton replaced Sam Kelly as Professor Hobbs, who was made unavailable shortly before filming due to breaking his leg in a car accident. This story was written by RTD at short notice to replace an episode by Tom McRae titled Century House, which RTD thought was too similar in tone to Unicorn and the Wasp, another episode this series. I've actually listened to a fan-made audio adaptation of Century House, which I thought was very good and would recommend. I'm pretty sure it's free on YouTube, at least last time I checked, that's how I listened to it. However, I don't believe the script for the original episode has ever been made available, so I assume the script itself was also fan-made based on the proposed plot for this episode. But it's still very good, and like I said, I would definitely recommend it. There are also some very complicated techniques involved in this episode in making sure that the mimicking and speaking at the same time in this episode was done right. You can pause the screen and read the full trivia entry about this if you want, but I also remember it being covered in a good amount of detail in the confidential for this episode. Because this is a bottle episode, it was mostly filmed in chronological order, a practice which isn't very common for Doctor Who or just TV shows in general really, although I'm pretty sure the same thing was done later on with Boom, which is also another bottle episode. And finally, David Tennant named this as one of his favourite 2 episodes of Doctor Who. Oh, and this isn't really trivia, but before anyone mentions it in the comments, yes, you can see the green screen in the background during the cold open, but this has apparently been corrected in some versions of this episode.